Hey, everybody. A big topic here on Pay Your Dues is running, as I believe sports in general offer a great metaphor for life. Put in the work and reap the rewards. Well, Matt Fitzgerald knows all about it. He's been a writer for more than 30 years, authoring or co authoring books on fitness, nutrition, and featuring some of the biggest names in endurance sports. Today, Matt takes us through facing our fears, getting to the start line, and getting to the finish line and reaping the rewards of facing new challenges. So let's get right to it with Matt Fitzgerald. Thanks for joining me. Glad you could be here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You've been writing about endurance sports for, I don't know, 30 years or so, and it seems like you write about the mental side of it as much as the physical side. Would you agree? There's definitely both parts of it to it.
Oh yeah, for sure. It all started. I was an athlete before I was someone who wrote about the sports I do, and before I was a coach. And so my interests, the things I write about, are really the things that I've latched onto in my own effort to be the best athlete I can be. And so the big ones for me are training, uh, nutrition, and the mental game. I'm not a big gear guy, so you're not going to find me writing a book about running shoes. But yeah, those are big three interests for me.
Yeah. Well, and keeping it simple is part of what you talk about in your book too, So it's interesting on the gear side. I was thinking about this because early in your writing was a lot about triathlon, right? Because you were
Yep.
writing for Triathlete magazine. And I think you had the great fortune, in my opinion, to cover a couple of the legends of triathlon, and Dave Scott and Mark Allen. And you wrote a book about that, the Iron War, which, for those that don't know triathlon, those two are like the Michael Jordan and Larry Bird of endurance sports, right? I mean, their story is epic, and that book is really good. What what do you think with technology today? How much faster would those guys be, or would it be much different for them today?
Good question. I would say, in their final showdown, the analogy I make is Chris Everett Lloyd and Martina Navratilova.
Yeah.
Just like two titans of a sport who are just head and shoulders above everyone else, but they're the exact equals of one another. And they just had so many classic battles, culminating in that 1989 race dubbed Iron War. And there, they broke Dave Scott's course record by like 18 minutes. And the third place finisher was literally 3 miles behind these two. So, and then, nobody could really match that performance for years. I mean, the course record did go down to Luc van Leerde of Belgium, but no one touched their marathon times until very recently. And it was only really when bike technology improved a lot and shoe technology improved a lot that you started getting athletes running faster. So I have to believe that if those two, I mean, if today's top Ironman athletes had to race with the equipment Dave and Mark had, they would be a lot slower.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you how impressive those athletes were at that particular time, and the training methods. I mean, training methods have evolved, and there's debates about that. But yeah, if you want to understand that Iron War, that the book is good, or if you look at YouTube, those races. I think you don't have to be an endurance athlete to appreciate what those guys went through. So, and I wonder, that was early in your writing career. I mean, how do you think that influenced you to be in that environment? I guess you were writing a little bit after they did that, but you were in that world. How did that influence you?
Yeah, I mean, it was I grew up watching those two on ABC's Wide World of Sports.
Right.
So like I was a fan of Dave Scott and Mark Allen. Mainly, I always wanted to see Mark win, and he never did. But I knew who those guys were, and after college, I moved. I'm an East Coast guy, but moved to California. Was looking for a writing job. Just happened to score a job with a startup endurance sports magazine called Multisport, which was founded by a gentleman named Bill Katowski, who had started Triathlete magazine 12 years before in 1983. Um, and um, and so that was my big break, as a journalist, I guess. And I was just immersed in this world, and got to meet Dave and Mark, in person,
Mhm.
and go cover the Hawaii Ironman, uh, and eventually moved down to San Diego, which was just like the epicenter for triathlon. And the more I learned about that story in particular, the more I felt like this story has to be told. Like, everyone knew it was like an amazing race, but has so many layers to it. And
Yes.
I was just like fortunate to be in the perfect environment. When I started writing the book in 2010, I think, I was working for a competitor group, which owned like Competitor Magazine, whatever. And, a guy named Bob Babbitt, the creator of Competitor Magazine, the guy who named Iron War, was at a
Yeah.
desk 15 feet from me. So while
Uh-huh.
I was researching this book, like, I could just walk into his office, and this guy was an encyclopedia of like 1980s, 1990s triathlon. So it was just cool. Like, I was like, it was right place, right time. I just felt a sense of urgency to get the story out while memories, like, while the people were still alive and people remembered. And yeah, it was a lot of work. By the time that book was published, I felt like I was living inside a bubble of 1989, and everyone else was in 2011.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, I just think, it just shows your passion for it, and it's one of those things, the podcast is called Pay Your Dues, and part of it is you being a writer. I'm curious, like, you knew you wanted to be a writer early on. I think your dad was a writer, and you found a way to marry your love of writing and your love of endurance into one thing, and not everyone can do that. So,
Nope.
what's your thoughts on being able to make that happen?
There's a quote from Larry King that I like. He said, like, anyone who talks about their success and doesn't measure luck is kidding themselves. So, I have to admit, like, there was little bit of luck involved, because, I mean, first of all, the luck of having the father I had, because he was running marathons in the 1980s. That's the reason I wanted to run. By the time I could read, there were, novels on bookshelves in our family home with my dad's name on the spine. So I grew up knowing that you could be a professional writer. So that
Mhm.
that was my first lucky break. And then, and I, and I knew I was going to be a career writer. I just, like, when I was 9 years old, I told my parents that's what I'm going to be when I grew up. I didn't necessarily know what kind of writing I was going to do, and so that was where luck intervened again. I went to college in the Philadelphia area. A couple of years after I graduated, moved to San Francisco, and, excuse me, like, I would have taken I was 24 years old, just getting started. I would have taken the first decent writing job I got.
Yeah.
Um, and it just happened to be that one. Now, it wasn't entirely luck, because I remember in the interview with Bill Katowski, he told me afterward the reason I got the job was he asked me, like, do you know who Dave Scott is? And I was able to just say, oh yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a
Yeah.
fan of Dave Scott.
Yeah.
So it wasn't entirely, they say you make your own luck to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah.
So the latest book is Chasing Mastery, and like I talked about it's definitely about the mental approach as much as the physical. And I wonder, this book, to me, it feels like it evolved over time with the lessons you've learned and the studying you've done. Do you think you could have written this book 20 years ago, or did it take time to learn these things?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. I could not have written it 20 years ago. It really is sort of like a summation. I think I had a philosophy before I knew what the philosophy was. So early on, in my very earliest days of writing about endurance sports, I didn't present myself as an authority at all. I was just a journalist. So if I was writing an article about intervals, I would call a coach and interview the
Uh-huh.
coach and share the coach's expertise. But over time, I started to develop kind of my own opinions and my own viewpoint. And I've always had my own angle on things. Like I'm a systemic thinker. I'm a big picture person. I'm a pragmatist. And just like there's just certain kind of mental traits that I have that influenced how I approached any subject. And so that would be true of really any subject. I mean, just take a random book like my book Racing Weight,
Uh-huh.
which is about optimizing body composition for endurance performance. Like, I wrote that book because I had a perspective on this issue that I didn't see represented out there, and
Uh-huh.
I just felt like there was an unmet need. I saw athletes really self-sabotaging in all kinds of ways in an effort to get skinny. And like, there's a healthy way to do this, like
Uh-huh.
psychologically and physically healthy way to do this, and no one's advocating it. And so that's why I wrote that book. And so that's a very specific topic. But if you could see me write about a different topic, you know, um, the mental aspect or whatever, and you would see that same perspective manifest. And it was only within maybe 2, 3, 4 years before I wrote this book that word mastery I latched onto. It's like, this is what I'm all about. It's a journey toward just being uh, owning your performance, like just really being in control of yourself as an athlete.
Uh-huh.
Like, that's what I was always trying to do as a coach. That's the type of teaching I was always trying to provide through my writing, and just didn't have a word and a concept for it. And I think I needed all those years, to make it all kind of hang together cohesively.
I clearly I'm, in our communication, I'm a runner. I really read running books. But I think your book and this book in particular apply to a lot of things. Like, we seek out endurance sports for, because we're looking for a challenge. And I don't think you have to be a runner necessarily to glean information from a book like this. I guess my question is, why do you think we look for endurance, or we look for these challenges, right? As humans, we want to do hard things. We want challenges. What have you found why people are seeking that?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really good question. I think, I mean, it's quintessentially human. Survival is just not enough for us. We have to stretch ourselves. We have to go further. And I mean, there's a negative side to that, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, look at maybe like something like AI, like this new technology, and everyone's saying, "Oh, like we need to put the brakes on." It's like, that's not going to happen. We're human. we
Right. It's
we
not
have we,
stopping.
we have no brake. So there can be fallout from the way we are, but I think to me it's one of the things that like makes me most proud to be human is this. Um, our reach is always exceeding our grasp, and we're just wired this way. I mean, not every single human individual wants to stretch
Right.
themselves, but it
Right.
is it is a trait of the species, and it's like, it's obviously just hardwired.
And there's a reason that there's a benefit to it, I guess. And you're also a coach for 25 years. So in your experience, what is the end result? What is the benefit people get from, whether it's an endurance sport or whether it's golf or whatnot, right? You have a challenge. Maybe you succeed at it, maybe you don't, but let's say you succeed at it. What's the benefit? What do we gain from that?
Yeah, it's a pretty long list, honestly. I mean, if you're looking at like the challenge itself, I have a line from another of my many books, Life is a Marathon, a memoir. The line is, happiness is knowing your strength. And that might not resonate with everyone, but it does with me. I had a pretty charmed childhood, and then have faced some really major life challenges as an adult. And one thing I found was that being a lifelong endurance athlete gave me the strength to be able to stand up to those challenges and not crumble. And I think that's part of like, there's like just this deep inner wisdom that understood that. I mean, for me, it's like, it's not that hard to unpack. I started running competitively when I was 11 years old, was one of the top runners in my state in high school, and maybe could have been state champion, but fell short. And it was because I was just mentally weak, to be honest. Like the pain that I had to subject myself to in order to take that next step, I wasn't ready for. And I was very self-aware about this at the time, and I did not like that. And I actually ended up quitting running. Was supposed to run in college, didn't. Got back into it in adulthood, and for me, when I started competing again in running and in triathlon, I was trying to do two things. One is like reach my potential performance wise, and the other one was to just become the man I wanted to see myself as. I wanted to see myself as brave and strong, and I didn't think I was either of those things. And so for me, it was all about that. Like I wanted to just improve my self-image through sport. And then only later, when all these life challenges started coming at me, did I discover, wow, this is actually really useful.
Right.
I'm a happy person who's able to handle a lot of stress and overcome big life challenges that have nothing to do with sport because of sport. So
Yes.
I think that for me is like the core benefit.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think whether it's a marathon or not, for me, it's the marathon. And I think you have a goal, you put a plan together, you follow that plan, you take some risks, you learn from your errors, right? And that's like whether you want to start a business, right, or you want to take on another sport or whatever your challenge is. I think the marathon is a great metaphor for
Yes.
those stages. And part of that is the suffering and the struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, you talk about the psychology of suffering, and tolerance to suffering can be trained. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, do you think, had you had more of that type of training as a high school runner, that would have helped you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, so I have another book. Sorry for all these references, but I have
No, I
another.
know you have like 30 books. I mean, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, another one called The Other Talent, which is about like how development works, not just endurance sports and all endurance sports. And like its jumping off point is the well-known phenomenon that in any given sport, the top 13-year-old athletes are never the top 26-year-old athletes.
Right.
Not I shouldn't say never, but like
Rarely.
statistically, yeah.
Yeah.
And it is because talent rules when you're 13, but development rules over time, and it's like the best learners that ultimately get the most out of themselves and develop the most. And one thing I found and did not go looking for in that book is that uh, athletes, people who had more than their share of adverse childhood experiences are overrepresented among elite athletes in adulthood. And there's some survivor bias there, because like you can have like just terrible parents, say, and you could have great potential as an athlete, but the bad parenting breaks you. And we don't know those stories because they don't become champions. So there's that. Nevertheless, it's and there's research showing that there's something there to it, that when an athlete who has a gift and just some kind of unshakable self-belief and adverse childhood experiences, like when you put those three things together, you end up with a future Olympic gold medalist. And for me, I had really great parents. I had like a very stable, like nurturing environment. And I think, and I would not trade that for anything, but I think it did actually uh, disadvantage me, like as a young athlete, where like I just didn't know what suffering was, or especially like volunteering for it. And so it just took me time. I had to just overcome that deficit of not being used to suffering.
Yeah, I help coach our high school cross country team. I've done it for a few years now, and I think suffering as it relates to running, and the pain of running and dealing with and like giving up before, you get to your goal. I think it's a hard thing to learn. I mean, I think you learn that through running over time. You probably
Yep.
learn that in life over time, but it is that's why I wonder if, some of these traits are the ones that excel young sometimes can figure that out, right? They
Yep.
learn how to run with that pain, but it is something that can be taught. A lot of it goes in back to the mental side of it, right? That you write so much about. And I wonder about you talk a lot about facing fear and
Mhm.
dealing with fear, and I see it in our runners.
Yep.
I've dealt with it as a runner. Fear of failure, and again, this applies to life, not just
Yep.
running, right? We
Yep.
don't do things because we're afraid of failing.
Yep.
And so how do people learn to deal with the fear of, whatever's in their head?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I know whereof I speak on this topic because, just to make it concrete, in high school, I once hid in the woods and intentionally missed the start of a race because I was so afraid. And it wasn't fear of failure for me. Like I was okay with losing, but it was just the pain. I did
Uh,
not want the pain. Another time in the middle of a race, I faked an ankle injury and just like collapsed on the infield, writhing in phony pain, so that I didn't have to finish the race. So these are the things I did. Shameful, shameful things that
uh,
I did. And now I'm at a point um, where I could be standing on the start line of an ultra marathon or an Ironman triathlon, and I am completely fearless, just utterly calm, like eager, excited, a little impatient, like let's go,
yeah.
but 100% fearless, not even nervous.
Uh,
And how did I do that? By working on it. So like, I mean, I'm human. I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everyone else. And for me, the formula is like number one is just it has to be an explicit goal. Like so many people, I say this in the book, Chasing Mastery, like when they're afraid, they think that the problem is the object of their fear, when the true problem is the fear itself. you know, you can fail without being afraid of failing. But
uh,
people who are really afraid of failing think they have to be afraid of failing. And it's not true. You don't have to. And so just like, so, if I talk to just a random, athlete off the street and say, hey, do you, does fear sometimes hold you back as an athlete? And they'll say, yes. And then I'll ask, what are you doing about it? Crickets.
yeah.
Just like, well, just
Right.
sort of vaguely hoping it goes away on its
Yeah.
own. It's like, nope,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. So honestly, I mean, I think you're halfway there just by like looking straight at your fears. Like you are the problem. And like I'm, like, yeah, of course I don't want to get injured. Of course I don't want to fail. Of course I don't want, all these objects of my fear to manifest, but they're going to. So why not see how fearless you can be in the face of these things? And so just like that conscious intention
Uh-huh.
is half the battle. Now there's still the other half left to be fought, which is just because it's not going to happen overnight. But like it's almost inevitable if you take that step. Just like I'm going to work on my fear, and then the process starts, and you just have to see it through.
I think it's also good to play out the scenarios. Like, okay, so whatever I'm fearful of, let's play it out, right?
Yep.
So what happens
Right.
if I if
Exactly.
I
Yep.
if I fail, right? Whether it's running or whatever,
Yep.
and is that really such a bad scenario? Would you
Right.
you you know would you rather try and have that than not try at all?
Yep.
But I think you've got to play that out, and I try to talk to our runners about doing that, and I've had to do that in my own running.
Mm-hmm.
I recently, I mean, I feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten stronger in running mentally because I know when I get to mile 21, 22 of a marathon, I've been there before.
Yep.
I know what's coming,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not fearful of that. Like I embrace it, but it's
Yep.
only in the last 5 years or so that I've figured that out, and I'm actually better runner now as I'm getting older because of
Yep.
that, you know? And so dealing with fear, I think, is a huge thing for us.
Hmm. Yeah, that's yeah, it's really I talk about the process of cognitive reframing in the
Right.
book, and that's essentially what you're doing when you play out. Because if you're just afraid and you don't take a step back to look at your fear and try to unpack it, then it just rules you. Like the fear, the emotion is making your decisions for you, and you're just going to be stuck where you are. But when you go through this reframing process, you're really just sort of like observing initially, like, um, what am I afraid of? And then like what thoughts are attached to this emotion, and then
Uh-huh.
the final step is like, so what?
Right.
Like, because well, sometimes you could end up deciding that, oh no, like, the thing I'm afraid of, it actually is the end of the world. And like, it's fear, but it's also rational. But a lot of the time, the example I always go to is, I see it a lot with the athletes I coach. Like, you get like, 9 weeks out from a marathon, and you have a big important goal, and you're not sure you have enough time to get fit enough, and then you're anxious,
Uh-huh.
and for that one, that one really can change, like, because you think the problem is the uncertainty. But if you look at it, it's like, okay, if, first of all, I don't know, like, I mean, I don't know that I don't have enough time. I just don't know that I do have enough time. So it's just uncertainty, is the thing you're worried about. And then, yeah, you move forward and say, okay, what if you just keep training and get as fit as you can in the time you have, and you run the race and you fall just short? What is the consequence? And like,
Yeah.
is it really so bad? And sometimes that can just be a great big sigh of relief for people. It's like, wow, I wrapped up so much stuff in this, treating it like it was the end of the world. And yeah, I don't want to fall short of my goal, but it's really not the end of the world if I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting the perspective people have before a race and after a race, you know, and like it's such a like once the race is over, like all that goes away.
Yep.
And if they could just take some of that and move it to the beginning, you know,
Right.
beginning of the race. I mean, one of the coaches I had over the years, I don't know if you know Chris Houth, is a running coach, but
Yeah.
I've worked with him. Yeah. I worked with him for a couple of years. It was very helpful. One of the things he challenged me on was run a race with like a little bit reckless, I
Yep.
guess. You know what I mean? Like you got to be trained for it,
Yep.
but just run this one a little feel what feels like reckless and see
Yep.
what you can do. And
Hmm.
that was a huge mind shift for me because it was like, wow, I actually was holding myself back,
Yep.
because of I was fear of bonking at
Yep.
mile 23 or whatever. And I guess my point is we hold ourselves back. It feels like, don't we?
Yep.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a photo of Roger Bannister back here, and I think that's the perfect example of that mental barrier that
Yep.
people have, right? So in 1954, Roger Bannister was the first one to break the 4-minute mile. No one thought it was possible, and as soon as he did it, another person did it a month later. 12 people did it in the next 2 years. 300 in 10 years. I mean, so once you get over that mental barrier, do you see that in runners? Just like that they put up mental barriers, and maybe it's not fear, but just believing that they can, even if it's a novice runner doing a marathon for the first time, that they put these barriers up.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the default for all of us, actually.
Uh-huh.
If you look at, there's a cool study I cite all the time where they had, I think it was like 12-year-old kids run a series of 800-meter races. And I think they did it 3 times, separate occasions. And this was like a novel challenge for them. Like none of them had ever run this distance before. And they looked at, how they performed and then how they paced. And what they expected to find was that their performance would improve. And it wasn't going to be because of training, because they weren't training. They were just running the races like a week apart or whatever. And so they expected the performance to improve without any change in fitness because they got better at pacing. What they found what actually happened was, performance did improve, but they didn't get better at pacing. They still like started too fast, like bowed down in the middle and then finished strong. But they just realized they were willing to suffer more. That's all it really was. Like the first time they're doing it, I remember the first time I ran like any kind of distance race. Like I was 11 years old. It was like 4 laps around, the soccer field at school. And like, I had, kids scamper around playgrounds all the time. Like I knew sprinting. I had never tried to run for like 6 minutes, in a race. I'm like, I thought I was dying. I'm like, what is happening to my body? Like it's really intense. And but then you finish it. Getting back to your point, like the you who's after the race is not the you who's in the race. You look back at it and like, wow, that really hurt, but it didn't kill me. And so when you do it again, you're like, I think I could probably just hurt a little more. And then so that's the default. Like those mental barriers, like there's just, and those instincts exist for a reason. That you need to be held back from doing things that are truly dangerous, but sort of like an immune system that just overreacts. Like you have these protective psychological mechanisms that are also like overprotective, and it's like a constant battle. When you're trying to improve as an endurance athlete, you need to realize like, oh wow, this is a perceptual barrier. This is not a real one, and I need to crash through it.
So you also talk in your book, about grit and restraint and the nuance between those two, because, we can listen to David Goggins and all these things get fired up to go out and run, which is grit and it's important, but also what you studied a lot of endurance athletes, pros and novice endurance athletes, and sometimes restraint is more important than grit. Yep. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So, grit is not, I wouldn't say that restraint is more important. There's no attention on it. The title of that chapter is Unsexy Restraint. It's like grit is sexy. And so everyone knows about it and everyone's trying to get grittier. I don't see a lot of athletes trying to get better at exercising restraint, but it is equally important. I mean, if you think about it, you need it all the time as an endurance athlete. What are you doing when you are, you start a marathon and you run the first mile at a pace that is just laughably easy? You're restraining yourself, right? Because
it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that. A lot of people go, 30 seconds faster than they should. And that's why I always advise people on marathons when they start, like hold back because people are cheering. You're all excited. Suddenly you start thinking like, I'm going to run I'm running 10 minutes faster than I thought. So restraint, I don't use that word, but I will going forward. But that is a key part of it, right?
Yep. Yeah. Self-control is another word for it. And look at, training as well. Training is, if you like wrestled in high school or played ice hockey in high school, you're used to like just doing everything very intensely. But that's not how endurance training works. Endurance training, it's the total body of work. It's the consistency that's hard. Like any individual thing you do should not be that hard. And the pros get that. Like they're always keeping some powder dry in their workouts, and that is also restraint. Like for me, I'm trying to run 70 miles this week. The only way I'm going to be able to run 70 miles and benefit from it is if no particular thing I do is all that challenging. And then think about scenarios where you develop a niggle somewhere, and it's something that's kind of worrisome. I know I've been there. It's like, well, every once in a while you get away with just pushing through it. So like, I'm going to
Right.
try that this time. A failure to exercise restraint in that situation could end up, what could have been like a 1 day off scenario ends up becoming a month off scenario. I had this, I think I probably mentioned it in the book. I trained, I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona right now. I came here in 2017 as a 46-year-old amateur and got to embed myself with the Hoka Northern Arizona Elite professional running team. And we ran, there was one other runner who was running the Chicago Marathon. He was a real pro. I was a fake pro. And we both had the long depletion runs. So like no calories before or during. His was supposed to be 22 miles. I think mine was 20. I think maybe his was going to be 26 and mine was 22, whatever. But he was way faster than me. So we started together. And then when we finished, I asked him how his run went. And he said, yeah, it went pretty good. My hip started bothering me a bit at the end. So I stopped a mile short of the finish. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
You didn't? And he's like, yeah, I mean, because it's like the thing has been, grumbling at me a little bit. I'd rather like have a key workout on Wednesday. I'd rather be ready for that than run a useless extra mile. I'm like, almost no amateur runner would do that.
That's right. They power through, right?
Yeah,
They
so
power
that's
through.
like, yeah, that's world-class restraint right there. You can see the finish. The training plan said 22 miles or 26 miles, not 25. And he's just like, no big deal. I'll stop a mile early. Yeah.
That's restraint.
Yes.
Yeah. And that you wrote a book about that experience called Running the Dream, which I read that book. And that experience I wanted to ask you about. So you spend 13 weeks there, I think you said, in a pro camp, basically. And I think you describe it as the best time of your life, I think is what you described it as. What else did you learn from them besides restraint that you took from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there were I think 13 runners on the team at that time, and they all had different personalities, but they all had like certain like mental traits that were all the same. And you could see like, oh, it's not just like the right DNA that it takes to get to this level. Like you also have to have certain mental traits. So for them, like one of them would be like they're very good at contextualizing and like not over indexing on the present. And so like they would have like just like a disastrous workout and then afterwards I would just like be a fly on the wall while they talked it through with their coach. And they would not catastrophize. They would not turn a molehill into a mountain. They were like, well, that sucked. But
and move on.
yeah, just like, but when was my last great workout? 3 days ago. So like, it's like, these bad workouts, I mean, these words would come out of their mouths. Like it's what a coach wants to hear an athlete say, but most amateurs aren't doing this. They're like, I had a bad workout. The plan's not working. My coach sucks. I'm not good at running, just like making, and with the pros, you just see this steadiness. I mean, they're human. So when they have a bad workout, it pinches, but they zoom out really quickly, contextualize, and flush it and move on. So stuff like that, just like being like, just the captains of their own ship, being like good at emotional self-regulation, those types of things.
What about recovery? What did you learn about recovery from that experience?
Yeah. So, I was here just like I was all in. I was like living the life of a professional runner, doing everything they did. And it wasn't just the running. I mean, in fact, I wasn't running as much as they do because I couldn't.
Right.
But I was running a lot by my standards. And I was 46 years old. And I felt great, like all the way through that training. I remember like being interviewed by a podcaster when I was like halfway through the experience, and his first question was like, man, what a meat grinder. Like, you must be just like barely hanging on. I'm like, nope. I feel like I could do a lot more. Like, I feel like good to terrific in every single run. And I think that, what people don't understand is, it's not so much the running, is the space around it that
Right.
allows athletes to work this hard and benefit from it. So yeah, they run, twice a day and they're hitting the gym, but outside of that, like they're sitting with their compression boots on, they're getting a massage, they're really eating right, they're eating on time. They're not skipping meals. Like they've got their smoothie waiting for them. Like as soon as the run is over, they're napping. They're getting 9 hours at night and another 90 minutes at some point during the day. And then some of the things that are a little more like intangible and touchy feely, like just being in a group, being in a beautiful environment, like having a lot of support. I think some of that stuff that you can't really put a thumb on is also like feeds into just the entire organism is just able to absorb that stress when like everything is pointing in the same direction. And I've since opened up a thing called Dream Run Camp here in Flagstaff. It's basically, the idea is like to make the experience I had available to anyone who wants it. And I hear exactly the same thing over and over and over. People come here for between 1 and 12 weeks, and a lot of them, they come here to train, and they're training a lot by their standards, and they tell me like, I can't believe how good I feel training this hard. And I'm like, yes, because it's the space around the running that is helping you.
And from that camp or even from the book, I think people can take pieces of that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
look, I mean, the reality is most of us, we have a job, we have kids, we're running this, soccer practice. I mean, we've got to go grocery shopping. I mean, it's hard, and I'm talking about marathon training. I mean, it takes time. So it is hard to fit it in. But if you're looking to maximize, your end result, it's the investment in those things. Like you are resting, you are finding, you're getting off your phone maybe and just resting or making a proper meal. So, we don't expect people to be elite runners necessarily, but there's pieces of knowledge they can get from that for the everyday person, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was very conscious of this because I knew it was only going to be 13 weeks and then I was going to have to go back home, and I couldn't take my coach with me. I couldn't take the teammates. I couldn't take the altitude with me, but there was a lot that I could take. I remember like the first strength workout I did with the team. I always thought of myself as someone who was like very committed to strength training, and doing it right and not mailing it in. And I was lying to myself. Like when I actually like was in a group and had a coach looking at me, it was like, my side plank form was terrible. And like, I wasn't like mixing up the exercises the way they did there. And so that I could take home with me, just like all these little, like doing like the really, like the well-rounded warm-ups before a key workout, like not skipping the drills and the mobility,
Right.
like all that I could take home with me, and did, and it really benefited me.
Yeah, and your end result there was a major PR in the Chicago Marathon.
That's
So
right.
you benefited from all that work. So okay, so you've been writing about endurance forever. You turned that into coaching for a number of 25 years or so. What do you think makes a good coach for folks?
The number one thing is people skills, being good with relationships, and that's not Matt's opinion. That is an evidence based statement.
Mhm.
The perception is that um, what makes a good coach is technical knowledge, but that's more like table stakes. Like that gets you in the room, that gives you the opportunity, like necessary but not sufficient. And what you find is, when studies are done, it's a little tricky to like measure athlete outcomes. I mean, you can be performance, but often it's like it's really just how the athlete feels about the coach. And regardless of how you measure outcomes, though, those it's the relational stuff that is at the top of the list. Just like feeling that the coach genuinely cares about the athlete, that the coach is committed, that the coach listens,
Mhm.
and communicates. Another one that is a little more nuanced is like demandingness. And so, the best coaches tend to be demanding of athletes. And like, why does that make athletes feel good? Because it makes them feel seen,
Mhm.
and taken seriously. And like, when you demand something of someone, when you believe in them, and athletes aren't
Right.
stupid, they feel that. So it's all this Ted Lasso stuff, honestly.
Yeah.
That's why that show is like, I know it's fiction, but it's not preposterous like that scenario, which is like, if you're really good with people and culture, like you can learn the technical stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think having somebody in your corner, I've had a few coaches, and I've always excelled when I've had them, because it's the guidance, right? But you're also achieving maybe levels that you didn't think you could do, right?
Yep.
So you get pushed to do more, and then you start believing in yourself.
Yep.
On the flip side, what makes a good pupil, right, or a student of running, when you've had a lot of them, so good and bad, I would suspect.
Yep. It is the same on the other side. I mean, it's communication it is key. I mean, if I think about like things that, like, every now and then I've had, it just doesn't work with an athlete. I've had those situations, and when I look at why, it's very often when like an athlete like withholds, and so they don't tell me things that like I have to know to do my job, or or they're even deceitful in their communication. So and that, a lot of this, it's circular, right? So the coach has to create an environment where the athlete feels comfortable, like being open and honest in their communication. But that's a big one. And and then it's really the people, athletes who are like wired to learn, who are like hungry to learn, who are curious, who view the process as a learning process, um, are like, they're easier to coach, or I can make more progress with athletes who have that orientation. All too many are like very outcome focused. It's like, it's not the growth mindset, it's the what's the other mindset,
Yeah, I don't know. Result mindset,
yeah,
I
it's like,
guess. I don't know.
everything's a test versus a stepping stone. Like
Yeah,
that can be, athletes who just like want it now.
yeah. Just tell
Uh,
me what to do. Tell me what to do,
yep,
and I'll go do it
yep,
sometimes, or they want to rush. I think part of that, though, is I think the benefit of having a coach also is understanding intention, right?
yes,
Every workout has an intention, right?
yep,
It might be just 3 miles easy, right?
yep,
But there's a reason you're doing it, and why, or what are you going, just don't run out there aimlessly. And
yep,
I think you get that level of learning from coaching.
yep. Yeah, I was just talking with an athlete that I'm about to onboard, and I was trying to explain my approach to him, and I get into this in the book, how um, athletes in technical sports, like tennis and basketball, what do they call the sessions where they work to improve at their sport? They call it practice. And
Hmm.
what do we endurance athletes call like our sessions? We call them workouts.
Hmm.
And so the word workout connotes just physical. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just like, I'm a machine and I'm applying a stimulus and then I adapt and then I'm better. Whereas, the word practice connotes mental engagement, learning. And I really think that endurance athletes should also be practicing, and you don't have to make extra time for separate sessions. Like you can turn every single workout you do, even like a random Wednesday easy run, into deliberate practice, where you're sort of like doubling the benefit. Yeah, your body's doing its thing and it's going to benefit, but your mind is also there with intention going into it, and then mindfulness in the execution of it. And you just see it, like the athletes who apply themselves in that way, they
Hmm.
improve much faster with the same training.
Yeah. And I think understanding intention of recovery too, right? That just plays into it. Like you're understanding the intention of both the workout and the recovery, and then you get the benefits coming out of that. I think some of that ties into another one of your books, which is 80/20 running, right? And maybe just explain that for folks, because it's really what we're touching on when we talk about restraint, right? Intentionality, because most of us go too hard too often in our workouts, correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. The average competitive recreational runner, exercise scientists these days, they divide the spectrum of intensities into three buckets: low intensity, moderate, and high intensity. And the average competitive recreational runner is doing almost half of their training, like time wise, um, in the moderate intensity bucket, and they don't realize it. And so why does that matter? Because all of the top athletes are doing 80% of their training at a low intensity. So they're actually, the best athletes are actually training easier
Wow,
than the
that's
rest of us.
amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, what studies have shown is that if you just show someone a treadmill and say, I want you to hop on there and run for 20, 30 minutes at whatever pace you choose. And so like they're getting no guidance. It's just like you have to run for this amount of time. People would just automatically kind of mindlessly choose a moderate intensity. And, I think there's a variety of reasons for that. I speculate on them in 80-20 running, but that is what people do when it's just like a default. When you're not being intentional, you just go to moderate. Nothing wrong with moderate intensity, like here and there, but what the pros are demonstrating is that you actually get a lot fitter if your training time is like weighted on the low intensity side, and then you're really getting after it, in the 20%. So yeah, in order to like break out of the moderate intensity rut, as I call it, and start training like the pros, the 80-20 way, it requires the exercise of restraint. And it's just a matter of actually being at low intensity when you intend to be at low intensity. It's as simple as that.
Yes, understand the intention. Yeah. So how has your view of success changed over the years? Because it's not always about time. You work with runners of all levels. What is success to you for one of your runners?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I look at it a couple of different ways. One is improvement, or like movement toward mastery. Improvement doesn't necessarily mean getting faster. It means getting closer to fulfilling all of your potential. So, I don't really feel like I mastered running until I was past my physical prime. So, some of the races where I feel like I demonstrated the highest level of mastery um, were not PRs. But I knew that I knew that when I ran my PR, I actually could have gone faster because I hadn't yet mastered the sport. And it's hard for a lot of athletes to get there, but like the champions are like that. They would much rather lose and stretch themselves than win easy. They really would.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why they're champions.
Yeah.
Like that is the game. It's like, I want to be the very best I can be. And so, shifting athletes toward that definition of success, it's nice because, if you're very outcome focused, then the entire process can be rendered meaningless retroactively if you fall short of your goal. It's like, oh wow, I didn't PR, that was a waste. Whereas if it's about growth, then you're succeeding every single day. So that's one that I think if you're performance focused, like that's how I define success. But then there's also those runners, we get a lot of them at Dream Run Camp here, like runners who don't even wear a watch when they run, or who don't race at all. We have a guy who trained and came here just to do a rim to rim crossing of the Grand Canyon, not completely non-competitive. And so I think another definition of success is like, if you are getting out of running what you want to get out of it, that is success. And it can be, whatever it is. I mean, I've known runners who run almost entirely for spiritual reasons, and it works. And like, I'm not going to call that unsuccessful just because you're not that fast.
Right. Yeah. It's a great point. I mean, it might be, and it's not always time, right? But a 4-hour marathoner or a 2:55 marathoner, it could be the same thing for them, right?
Yep.
Facing a challenge and getting through that challenge,
Yep.
right? And I think that's the benefit of running. So for people that want to understand the Dream Run Camp, I'm sure there's folks out there that are hearing this thinking like, all right, I want to go spend a week or two there. What's their best way to find out about that?
Dreamrun.com is the website. And there's just this like a call to action there. You can just submit a form that I receive personally. This is a one-man show here
Mhm.
at Dream Run Camp. So just like you can express interest that way.
Great. And then I guess final words, what would you, maybe there's someone out there that's thought about running a marathon, hasn't done it yet, whatever age they are. What would your encouragement be for them to face that challenge, maybe face that fear? And I just talked to a coworker yesterday. He's
Mm-hmm.
training for his first marathon. I've given him some guidance. He doesn't
Yeah.
think he can do it. And I've told him you can do it. Like I
Yeah.
was walking him through that. So, and I want to see the other side of it when he does it, right? Because
Yeah.
I know he can do it and what that will mean to him. So what do you tell people? I'm talking more of a beginner here because I think getting started sometimes is the hardest part.
Yes. I'm always careful to when I'm talking to an athlete who's, kind of on the fence, I tell them like, it has to come from you. Like, because you see it, you see people who are like, oh, I'm running a marathon because I'm not taken seriously as a runner because I haven't run a marathon. Like that is not a good reason to run a
Right.
marathon. It's a lot of hard work. And so it has to be something that's in your heart. But then if it is in your heart, then you shouldn't let any artificial barriers stand in your way. And it's not like, I mean, the mission is not to complete the marathon. The mission is to try. And so if you look at it that way, just like, just to give a personal example, this hasn't come up in this conversation, but I lost the ability to run for nearly 4 years due to long
Uh-huh.
COVID recently.
Uh-huh.
I got COVID very early, got very, very sick, stayed sick, and I thought I would never run again. I didn't run a step for more than 3 years. And then early last year, decided to sign up for the longest race I'd ever attempted. And I wasn't running I couldn't run at the time. It was a 100-kilometer desert ultra marathon here in Arizona. And I'm like, I had 10 months to figure it out, to like, just to start over. And I told people, like, I'm giving myself like a 10% chance of making it to the start line. we'll,
Uh-huh.
we'll see about the finish line. But and I meant it like that. Like when I was just alone with my thoughts, I thought I have about a 90% chance of quote unquote failing. But what I knew was like, it wasn't about that. It was about the journey that I would experience attempting it. And so, I signed up at midnight on New Year's Eve, which is when registration opened. And when I woke up the next morning, I had already won because I was eager and focused in a way I hadn't been for a long time. I still couldn't run. I still had to figure the whole thing out, and I still gave myself a 10% chance of making it to the start line. But that's really that's the mindset. It's just like, of course you want to make it to the start line, and of course you want to finish the race. But like if you're doing this in the right spirit, you can't lose. Like you are going to transform. You are going to experience a journey you will never regret, whatever happens at the end of it.
Yeah, it's the journey. That is perfect. And you are running, so you are up and running again. You're up to
Yes.
70 miles. You're doing
Yeah.
70 miles, so you're back. Okay, good.
Yep.
That's good. And planting that flag. That's another thing is planting that flag. Because you chose to sign up for a race. You felt like you needed to have it on the books
Yep.
for it to be real. Is that what you felt like?
Yeah. It was just I call it the high bar effect, where when I couldn't run, I just I didn't even try all that hard to improve my health because like I didn't have a major incentive. Like I had spent most of my life getting good at being uncomfortable. So I'm like, I'll just grin and bear it. But there were lots of things that I could have done just to be healthier that I wasn't going to do unless I put a moonshot out there. That gets back to like the human spirit. Like survival isn't
Right.
enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great story to end on because I think, a lot of people can relate with that. Like you had that setback and then
Yep.
you rebuilt it back.
Yep.
Well, I'll put links to, your books in the show notes. I mean, you're easy to find. People can just simply Google you. You have a website, but I could probably talk to you for a couple more hours, but we'll wrap it up here. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks for inspiring me and other runners, with your writing and your coaching. And thanks for sharing your story today.
You're welcome. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.